They say they like to do things bigger. Well, their biggest storm ever has led to catastrophic flooding in Houston, the fourth largest city in the United States. Texas Governor Greg Abbott warns that the rainfall poses a serious threat in the days ahead.
This likely is going to be an historic rainfall, if not an all-time record in the amount of rain that is sustained in certain regions. I also want to emphasize to our fellow Texans that there will be locations today, tonight, and tomorrow that will continue to have tornado action. So Texans need to constantly be watchful and hopefully have the ability to stay tuned to information about tornado warnings and watches.
Right, how much rain has fallen? 30 inches, 3/4 of a metre. In parts, roads have become rivers, and boats are the only way to get around parts of the huge city area. Many residents have been stranded in their homes, among them Jason Carey.
I don't think anybody expected just the level of flooding that we're getting. And right now, my apartment complex is surrounded by water, so we couldn't leave even if we wanted to. So with an 8-month-old in my household, I'm kind of worried about, just how long this is going to persist, considering that this can go on until Wednesday, they seem to predict.
Oscar Margain is a reporter for the Tegna Broadcasting Service in the United States. He's been traveling between Corpus Christi and Rockport, where the hurricane first hit.
Today, we had some access to Rockport, one of the rural communities about 45 minutes north of Corpus Christi that has been devastated by this storm. And it was just incredible just to drive through the streets, some of the ones that were open at least, and just to see all the debris and the rubble and everything that this community is going through. It's a community of about 9,000 residents, and they're all trying to pull themselves together. Roofs have been blown off their homes. Buildings have been destroyed. Cars, vehicles, RVs, you name it, they've been flipped over. But flooding really has taken place wherever there are rivers and the Houston area. They are really the ones who are at this moment in dire need of rescue because of the floods. These natural disasters sometimes take days before people are able to get any sort of relief from the government, which is what happened in Katrina. But in Katrina, it was more of, I guess, negligence and some sort of lack of preparation. Here, authorities really want to make sure the people know that they're there. We have seen many crews in the streets trying to repair street lights and electricity and try to bring clean water back to residents. But it takes time. It takes time.
What are the main concerns in the coming days, Oscar?
Main concerns, I would say, are, I think, getting people back their power. Resources like gasoline and food are slowly returning. We see many volunteers from all across the state pouring in, bringing bottled water to these residents because they know that they're not going to be able to get that anytime soon. Houston it's another monster. They have a whole different situation there with flooding and people not being able to get out of their home.
President Trump is expected to arrive in the state on Tuesday. How is he going to be received? I suppose is his timing to his reaction to the disaster appreciated?
For the folks that we've been talking to, they really are not looking at what the president is doing, at least not the people here on the ground. They're concerned about getting their lives back to normal. However, city folks and our colleagues here, we have noticed that the famous Twitter is something that I think has come to the president's advantage. He has kind of explained in a way that it's easy for people to access, that he is on top of this, he's paying attention and he's monitoring. And he also explained recently that he wants rescue crews and local government to do their job, and he doesn't want to interfere with that. People, again, they don't really care about what the president's doing right now. They care about who's going to bring their water back into their homes.
Oscar Margain is a reporter for the Tegna Broadcasting Service in the United States.
To India now, and the saga of controversial guru Gurmeet Ram Rahim Singh, who's due to be sentenced for rape today in the city of Rohtak, 70 kilometres from the capital, Delhi. Now, his conviction was greeted with riots by his followers, which led to at least 38 deaths, so there's a high alert before the sentencing. At the weekend, a curfew was lifted to allow hundreds of the Guru's followers to leave the headquarters of his movement. Our correspondent Justin Rowlett has been reporting on this story. Managed to have a peek inside.
So we've managed to get inside the Dera complex. This is the spiritual headquarters of the Guru.
Let's go.
So this is the hospital. The meditation hall is over here. And where does the Guru live?
That building, no, next to the meditation hall.
The one that looks like a temple, like a palace.
Yeah.
You enter through gates decorated with giant sculptures of fruit, an indication of just how bizarre this huge place is. It covers 1,000 acres.
And then you have a big auditorium here.
It's a very, very huge open area where Guruji preaches.
Now,
So where lakhs and lakhs of people can sit and listen.
the hundreds of thousands of people could come and sit.
Lakhs, and on major occasions there are more than 2.5 crore, 3 crore people which has become.
Millions of people have come.
Millions of people.
So how many people are in the complex at the moment?
No idea, because I'm not looking after the management of people.
But we're talking thousands.
Yeah, maybe at any point of time.
Any point of time, there's thousands
At
of
any
people.
point of time there are at least thousands, because thousands of people are also living in this premises as well.
And working, because there are factories, farms. It's an enormous complex, isn't it?
You can say it's a mini city in itself.
It is like a mini city, isn't it? It's extraordinary.
Guru Ram Rahim is a charismatic figure. He stars in his own movies. His huge beard and flamboyant style have led to him being dubbed the Baba of Bling. And despite his sometimes extraordinary appearance, he has a massive following. Though his claim that he has 60 million devotees worldwide is probably an exaggeration. That is the sound of a military convoy. The area is under a strict curfew. Shops are closed, roads are blocked, and residents have retreated into their homes. The authorities have ordered that the Guru's assets, including the temple complex, be seized. But from what I've seen, his followers are not likely to give it up without a fight, leaving a very tense standoff.
Well, Justin is now on the line, and he's just outside that complex that he took a tour of. And Justin, with such anger recently expressed by his followers, isn't where you are going to be quite a focus, quite a tense place in the hours to come?
Yeah, it's very tense indeed. I mean, we're at a roadblock now manned by police and paramilitary police. There's probably at least 50 to 100 police here. So this is on a road leading into the temple complex. We're probably 1.5 kilometres away. What's been happening overnight is that the army has kind of warned the people in the complex this is their last opportunity to leave. They laid on hundreds of buses. We think a number of thousand, perhaps 4,000 or 5,000 people left the complex overnight. But we understand that 15,000 to 20,000 people remain inside. So if you like, this is the hardcore. These are the people who, despite having been told they should leave, have decided to stay on. So what we've got now is a standoff between them and the police and military forces outside, kind of effectively where I'm standing, encircling the complex. Now, the other thing that's been happening, which is quite interesting, is that villagers who are between the kind of the lines of army and police and the complex have been leaving their homes and taking their valuable buffalo and cows with them. They're moving out now. Clearly they're worried that at some stage the Indian authorities are going to besiege the temple compound.
How much depends on the sentence? With all the anger expressed by the conviction, there must be remarkable pressure felt by the judges and the security services as well.
Look, of course, they're under huge pressure. The Prime Minister has intervened in this to say, look, nobody is above the law, i.e. a clear signal to the courts that they should give a sentence that they feel is appropriate for the crime, the 2 rapes that he was convicted of last week. Of course, you know, his followers will be angry. We saw the fury they expressed on Friday when there were these terrible riots across North India. One hopes that that will not be part of the judgment about what the sentence will be. But of course, the sentence incidents will affect the atmosphere inside the compound. We're expecting a minimum of a 7-year custodial sentence. There will certainly be anger there. But in a sense, the bigger issue now is how the authorities deal with this ongoing presence of these devotees within the complex, a complex which the authorities have said they want to seize in order to recover the damages that the followers caused during these widespread riots in North India at the end of last week.
Justin, many thanks. Stay safe. Our correspondent Justin Rowlett outside the Guru's compound, although compound, as you heard there, doesn't really do it justice. Mini city is more like it. That sentence expected in a few hours' time.
You're listening to Newsday from the BBC with Carney Sharp and Lawrence Pollard. Let's take a look at the headline this half hour. The biggest storm in the history of Texas has led to widespread flooding, with the city of Houston said to be facing a catastrophic storm. And the sports now with Matthew Kenyon.
Good morning, Carney. Arsenal manager Arsene Wenger has asked Gunners fans to stick with the team despite their disastrous, that's his word, performance against Liverpool in the English Premier League on Sunday. A 4-0 defeat, including standout performances from Mohamed Salah and Sadio Mane for Liverpool, left Wenger admitting his side were not at the right level physically, technically or mentally. Elsewhere, Kylian Mbappe was on the bench as Monaco thrashed Marseille 6-1 in France. Real Madrid had to come from behind to draw 2-2 with Valencia in Spain. There'll be no Alex Iwobi for Nigeria in their World Cup qualifying doubleheader against Cameroon. He has a thigh strain. Nigeria's women are the Afrobasket champions. This is basketball we're talking about after victory over Senegal in the final last night. Start of the US Open tennis later. Second seed Simona Halep against returning and unseeded Maria Sharapova, one of the highlights. And Lewis Hamilton's Mercedes team say they had the perfect weekend after he won the Belgian Grand Prix. He's now 7 points behind championship leader Sebastian Vettel, who finished second.
Matthew, many thanks indeed. More from him in 20 minutes. It's 18 minutes past the hour. I must apologise. I can say sorry. It takes 5 characters. I said Twitter had a new boss earlier. They're quite happy with their boss. It's Uber instead. That's only 4 characters.
I think I have to say sorry.
No, come on. Let me cover. Ride sharing, this is. Of course, they've had a lot of trouble. Questions about their corporate culture, as it's called. And now they've got a new boss. Who wants to take it on? Viv Nunes is here to tell us more.
Well, we're told that Dara Khosrowshahi is to be the new chief executive of Uber. He's been chosen anyway, but the company hasn't confirmed this and he hasn't yet accepted. He's currently the boss of Expedia, the online travel company, and he's been in that job since 2005. Now, he's 48, he's born in Tehran, and he's said to be one of America's most prominent Iranian Americans. Now, if he is confirmed as the boss, he'll be replacing Travis Kalanick, who, as we mentioned, was forced to resign following a lot of pressure from shareholders after all those bad news stories.
Does investors want a new direction? What does a new man at the top mean? Because Uber was so associated with the swashbuckling Mr. Travis, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a sort of difficult one for him. There's a lot of problems at Uber. We spoke about this a lot earlier in the year. There were all sorts of controversies surrounding allegations of sexual harassment at the firm. That triggered a big internal investigation into work practices there. And there were concerns that there were very low rates of women working at Uber, as well as a very macho culture in the company. The worst scandal, though, wasn't actually in the San Francisco offices. It was in an Uber itself. You probably remember Travis Kalanick was caught on a dashboard cam arguing with an Uber driver, one of his own employees, really, about the cost of fares. That wasn't a great look. It went viral. It was published by the media. After that, the pressure built and built on Travis Kalanick. He was asked to step aside for a few months and he resigned in June. Many commentators actually accused him of being quite a good scrappy entrepreneur of a startup, but then failing to kind of transition into the leader of a successful, huge company.
So that's what they want the new guy to do. Other news as well, a big inquiry into a big bank in Australia.
Yeah, this is the Commonwealth Bank. A couple of weeks ago, it was revealed that Australia's Financial Intelligence Agency, that's called AUSTRAC, was taking this bank to court over what it says are breaches of anti-money laundering regulations. Now, AUSTRAC actually accuses the Commonwealth Bank of breaching those anti-money laundering regulations on nearly 54,000 occasions. Now, basically, the Commonwealth Bank is accused of allowing its ATM machines to be used by money launderers or not being vigilant enough when it came to stopping this, and also criminal gangs. So because of that case, the banking regulator in Australia has now announced an inquiry into the bank's governance and accountability practices. So we're certainly going to be hearing a lot more about this case as the months go on.
Thank you. You can make any sort of organisation sound snappy by putting Oz in front of it. I suppose they're quite lucky in Australia. That's the Oz biz. Thank you very much indeed with Viv Nunes.
Now, some of those affected by the massive 2005 suicide bomb blast that killed ex-Lebanese Premier Rafik Hariri and 21 others in Beirut will open their case today at the UN-backed tribunal set up to prosecute Mr. Hariri's killers. The attack had long-term political ramifications that are still being felt in the region today. Our correspondent in The Hague is Anna Holligan, and she joins us now. Good morning, Hannah. This is now 12 years later. Why has it taken so long?
Indeed. Well, this is a huge day for the victims and for Lebanon, although, to be honest, there aren't many people there who are paying much attention to this trial, partly because it's been going on for so long and partly because the suspects aren't actually there. They have never been brought to face justice. It's the first time actually today that the International Court will hear testimonies from victims who have been the victim of terrorism. And it's also the first time since the Nazi trials at Nuremberg that international prosecutions are taking place in the absence of the suspects. One of the reasons it's taking so long is because they're poring over the mobile phone data, the records of where the 5 men who are suspected of setting up this plot to detonate a suicide bomber's vest close to the George Hotel on the Corniche in Beirut, where they were in the moments before the bombing took place. And so today will be a diversion from that, because it's not about the records, it's not about the facts and figures. We're expecting this to be a very emotional day in court, and it's a chance for the victims to explain how they've been affected by what happened on Valentine's Day in 2005.
And the UN Tribunal has, since it started in 2007, implicated Syrian officials and the Lebanese Shia movement Hezbollah in the killing. Politically very sensitive, this trial still.
Hugely so. If you've been to Beirut, it's difficult not to detect that constant underlying simmering of a consciousness that there is a heavily charged atmosphere there, and the trial brings that back to the surface again. So we are expecting it to start making headlines once these victims' testimonies get underway today, because it's the first time the court will ever have heard of them. The 5 men who have been indicted by the court, they're all linked to the Shia movement, Hezbollah, who also play a role in the Lebanese government. They were indicted by the tribunal, but many of the people who have been affected see this as a highly politicised affair, which is aimed at undermining Israel's opponents, and it's very difficult to stay away from that. So today they're hoping that the focus will be on those who are affected. And we were speaking to the previous spokesperson of the STL, the tribunal, and he said that this isn't a waste of time, despite so much criticism suggesting it is, because even if the suspects aren't there, this is all part of the process to discover a vital truth, and that's what the victims are waiting for. And even if there are convictions, ultimately the culprits will have to live with that for the rest of their lives.
OK, Anna Holligan, thank you very much.
Right, canakinumab. Remember that, because you might be hearing more of it. It's a new drug for which there are many hopes. One drug, well, we'll find out whether that's a fair way of describing it. It's being given in tests to people suffering from heart conditions, and it appears to be quite successful. 24% reduction in heart attacks is what it claims. Let's get a little bit more about how it works and whether these claims stack up from somebody with a kind of, sort of a sideways view of it, not involved, as I understand it, in the programme. Professor Metin Avkiran, who's Associate Medical Director at the British Heart Foundation. Professor, do you share the excitement about this drug? And if so, can you give us an idea about how it works?
Yes, I do. I think this is a very exciting study, results of which were announced yesterday at the European Society for Cardiology Congress. It's an entirely new class of drugs in terms of targeting patients with heart disease. It targets a process called inflammation, and it's long been theorized that ongoing inflammation in the coronary artery supplying the heart actually increases the patient's risk of having a heart attack. So what this study has done is it's looked at 10,000 high-risk patients who had a prior heart attack and had evidence of ongoing inflammation as indicated by a blood marker. And the patients were given placebo or the active drug. And it's important to note that nearly all of the patients were already on high-dose statins, which we know already work and reduce risk by lowering cholesterol. This drug, on top of statins, produced a further 15% reduction.
Right, so it's a different approach. So, I mean, people may have heard of statins. Many people are prescribed statins, and that, as you mentioned, that sort of reduces the blood fat, the cholesterol. This appears to be a different approach. Now,
absolutely.
You seem to say they can work together as well. So this isn't necessarily a replacement. It's kind of an alternative.
Indeed, and that's really the exciting finding here, is that this drug works through a completely different mechanism and actually can add further to the benefit that is provided.
So particularly on anti-inflammation in the arteries. Now, a 24% reduction comparatively, I mean, that sounds terrific, but what does that compare to?
Well, actually, looking at the numbers carefully, the reduction was around 15% reduction in the risk of having another heart attack, stroke, or indeed dying from either of those conditions. And in terms of the benefit, that's comparable to the benefit that the statins provide. But remember, in this study, 93.4% of the patients were already on high-dose statins. So this benefit is on top of that afforded by this statin already. So it is a significant benefit.
Right. And there also seems to be some kind of cross effect as well on other illnesses. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, that was unexpected and actually very exciting that in looking for potential adverse effects of the drug, the investigators looked at the incidence of other conditions, including cancer. And there was a dramatic reduction in death from cancer, and in particular a dramatic reduction in the incidence of lung cancer and death from lung cancer.
And how long before I mean, obviously it's been tested in depth. How far along the approval process are we?
I think this is a big step, but more work is still required to essentially carry out a full cost-effectiveness evaluation, because this new drug is rather expensive. It's been estimated that in the United States it would cost around $200,000 a year to treat a patient.
Wow. Okay.
So in the current state, it cannot be given to all comers.
Many questions still remain, but it looks hopeful for now. Thank you from the British Heart Foundation, Professor Metin Avkiran.
This is the BBC World Service, where now we're looking up.
The sky over my backyard looks so close tonight. I don't need...
Hello, welcome. This is Newsday from the BBC World Service with Lawrence Pollard and Carney Sharp.
Parts of Texas underwater as tropical storm continues to rain down. We have the latest.
In South Africa, a trial for cannibalism starts today.
Refugees in Tanzania running short of food, says the UN. We find out why.
Plastic bags are banned today in Kenya. We'll hear why cows will be celebrating.
So we've got the sport with Matthew Kenyon and the hyperlink, the prospect of 700-mile-an-hour travel in a tube.
BBC News with Nick Kelly. Catastrophic floods are severely affecting Houston in Texas, which has been experiencing what meteorologists say is the biggest storm in the state's history. More than 30 inches of rain have fallen on the city. 20 helicopters are being used to pluck trapped people from rooftops. A ban on plastic carrier bags has come into force in Kenya. From today, anyone found selling, manufacturing or even carrying the bags could face fines of up to $38,000 or prison sentences of up to 4 years. British and German business groups have issued a joint statement urging British and European Union negotiators to put economic interests first in Brexit negotiations, which are due to resume today. Chambers of Commerce from Britain and Germany say that certainty is essential over arrangements for customs, tax and workers' rights. The German chambers say many of their members are already shifting investment away from the UK in anticipation of future trade barriers. The French President Emmanuel Macron will host a summit of European and African leaders today, which will focus on efforts to control flows of migration across the Mediterranean. Mr. Macron has spoken of setting up hotspots in 3 countries, Chad, Niger and Libya, to process applications for asylum in Europe. The BBC correspondent in Paris says Libya's chronic instability would appear to make any idea of establishing processing centres there unlikely. The US Navy says it has now recovered the bodies of all 10 sailors who were found to be missing after their warship collided with an oil tanker off Singapore last week. Divers found the remains in flooded compartments of the USS John S. McCain. And the future of the bluefin tuna is being decided at an international meeting, which is getting underway in South Korea. Japan is the world's biggest consumer of bluefin tuna and has come under pressure to impose restrictions to halt overfishing. BBC News.
Thanks for the latest, Nick. This is Carney and Lawrence with Newsday. Got Matthew Kenyon on the way with the sport in about 15 minutes' time. Plastic carrier bags banned in Kenya from today. We've got a report on the way. Also, another high-profile trial in South Africa to talk about. It involves cannibalism. So just a warning ahead of that piece, and the hyperlink as well. Another bright idea by a man full of bright ideas, Elon Musk, the man behind the Tesla electric car and PayPal. The idea, vacuum tubes propelling people in pods at 700 miles an hour. We talked to some students who've been designing pods. All that coming up here on Newsday.
But first, Hurricane Harvey, which hit the Texas coast on Friday, has now been downgraded to a tropical storm. But that won't matter much to the people of the Houston area, having to deal with a lot of water. About 80 centimetres of water has fallen. Much more is expected in the next few days. Our correspondent James Cook is there.
Well, I've just arrived in Houston in the middle of most incredible thunderstorm. Lightning flashing across the sky high above the tall buildings every few seconds here, and the thunder echoing around, and the rain is just incredible, bouncing off the ground and actually bubbling up, almost exploding up higher than my waist out of the drains, which are clearly struggling to cope. By dawn, it was clear that the city was being overwhelmed. Motorways were deserted except for emergency vehicles. Roads had become rivers and drivers had nowhere to go.
This is crazy. I've flooded a car before, but I've never seen anything this bad. It's insane. There's 2 cars down there. We don't know if people are trapped in the cars. It's insane.
I drive this street every day, and it's kind of crazy to look, looks like a river now. We need a canoe to get out there, but hopefully it resides soon.
Emergency alerts have become the soundtrack of the city, warning of flash flooding and tornadoes. The governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, says the scale of the storm is unprecedented.
Well, this appears to be either the worst or one of the worst floods Houston has ever had. We are measuring it not in inches, but in feet. As you probably have seen, there are countless water rescues. Our first and foremost focus at this particular time is saving lives.
In the suburbs, I watched as evacuees were taken to safety in boats, huddled together under blankets and towels. But Pedro Palomo took the hard way out, wading more than a mile in water up to his neck after his vehicle became stuck.
My truck got stuck, so I have to find a way to come home. Yeah, so I have to walk all the way there. And the rescue boat was over there, but I was helping somebody else, so yeah.
So there are rescues happening just up there?
Yeah.
And still the rain comes down. Harvey is now a tropical storm and it's lingering over inland Texas. Tom Sabatelli is a hurricane risk expert.
Harvey has now been downgraded to a tropical storm, so the wind risk has been mitigated. The winds that we saw 130 miles an hour no longer exist, but we're at the stage now where it is a very moist, dangerous system that's going to stall and produce quite a bit of rain, up to potentially a year's worth of rain just in a couple days over the Texas coastline.
Back in Houston, more and more houses are at risk. Jennifer Mendez is worried about her home.
We've never seen anything like this since Hurricane Katrina. I think this is pretty much like it, honestly. It's pretty bad.
Is it frightening? Is it scary?
Honestly, yes. Yeah, because last night the water was a bit higher, but now it's a bit lower. But yeah, I think it's gonna get higher and I'm pretty scared about that.
She was right. The waters just keep on rising. This is already one of the worst natural disasters in US history, and it's far from over.
James Cook reporting, and we'll be hearing more from the ground sort of later in the programme, so stay tuned. BBC World Service.
To a standstill today for the court appearance of 5 men linked to a strange and grisly case of cannibalism, charged with murder, attempted murder, and for being in possession of human body parts. Last week, one of the men involved walked into a police station with part of a leg and an arm and in his arms and told an officer, "I'm tired of eating human flesh." The BBC's Nomsa Maseko is there for the men's court appearance. This case has gripped South Africa, Nomsa. Just bring us up to date on what we know about it.
This is a story that's quite bizarre, and it has caught the attention of many South Africans. As you said in your cue there, that a traditional healer walked into a police station a few days ago, actually, and told the police officer that he was tired of eating human flesh. And when police officers did not take him seriously, out of his bag, he took out a severed hand and a part of a foot, saying that, "There you go, there's your evidence, arrest me now." And then after that, police obviously arrested him immediately. And then he led them to his mud hut where he lived. And that is where police found in a suitcase stuffed with other body parts. But what was even bizarre is that they found 8 human ears in a cooking pot, and it's believed that they had already been cooked and ready to be served to this traditional healer's clients. And it is widely believed in this community that once you are given human body parts to consume, it makes you strong and invincible, and you'll become rich very quickly. But others are angered by this because of the fact that there's a woman who lives not too far from where these men are going to be appearing from court. She was found, her body was found decomposing, decapitated, with both legs missing and a hand missing. And also this traditional healer has now told police that he fed the woman's heart and liver to his clients who are thieves in the area, and the reason why he gave them those parts is to make them bulletproof, so that even when or if they do get shot or arrested by the police, they become invincible.
I know that the country was really taken aback by this case, because it is something that has not happened on this scale as we know it before. But there's also been suggestions, though, that there might be cases of mass cannibalism, despite what the South Africans have been saying. But there isn't any real evidence of this, is there?
Well, there isn't real evidence of this until now. In fact, police, when I've spoken to them in the past and I've asked them, this is what I've heard, because there was another story where a man was arrested and human hearts were found in his fridge, and police said, no, that's fake news. But later then admitted that, well, we did not want to scare off the community. That is why we are investigating this quietly. But this is a story that has indeed angered so many people, including traditional healers themselves, because I went and then asked traditional healers, how is it that they talk about healing but deal in human body parts? And most of them were enraged, saying that human tissue and traditional, it cannot be healing. You cannot be killing someone with the hope of trying to heal somebody else's other problems. In fact, a traditional healer also gave me an example, saying that she cannot be promising to bring back your lost lover when she herself does not have a husband. She cannot be promising you riches when she herself is struggling to find a job. So it's one of those things that they feel that South Africans need to wake up to, South Africans need to be educated about, so that such acts do not happen again.
And traditional healing is very much part of the local culture there. People rely on these traditional healers. It's really good to hear that there has been anger from the traditional healing community. But will they recover from a case like this?
Well, they always do. This is not the first time that such a case is being heard in South Africa. And the fact that cannibalism is not a crime in South Africa is also another bizarre thing that the police still need to explain. And I should actually tell you this, that when we arrived at Shayamoya village here in Escort yesterday afternoon, we had arranged to meet up with a community leader who had agreed to take us around. And when we met him, 2 bodyguards with massive rifles, just walked up to us saying, "Don't worry, you are safe with us." And when they realized that I was pregnant, they actually said, "You are actually in even more need of security, because pregnant women and those who are found drunk in the community are becoming easy targets for cannibals who live in this area." So this is a community that really, really lives in fear. The women that I spoke to who live here, they're saying that they are even scared to go and fetch water, because they now have communal taps where they go and collect water a few meters from where they live, that they can only do this during the day and not at night because they fear for their lives.
OK, the BBC's Nomsa Maseko reporting there.
It's 18 minutes to the hour. Now, let's go to Tanzania, where there are warnings of the dire position being faced by 300,000 refugees. The World Food Programme says it's had to reduce food rations for the people living in northwest Tanzania because of a shortfall in international funding. How often have we heard that story? Let's speak now to Michael Dunford, who's the WFP's representative in Tanzania. Now, as I understand it, this is the area sort of way over in the west, near Democratic Republic of Congo, near Burundi. Is that where the people affected here have come from?
That's right. Good morning. The World Food Programme is currently supporting over 300,000 refugees, most who have arrived from Burundi in the course of the last 2 years, but we also have in excess of 60,000 refugees from the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Right, and you've had to reduce food rations. In blunt terms, what does that mean they're getting? What were they getting? What are they getting now?
Well, gradually since May, we've been cutting, and unfortunately in September, we'll only be providing them with 60% of what is considered the minimum requirements. So this obviously will have an impact. It will increase food insecurity, it will increase malnutrition, and it makes the population more susceptible to illness and diseases. It also creates increased tension in the camps. And when you consider that there are in excess of 320,000. This is effectively the size of a city like Reading or Sunderland. So, this is large populations all suffering the effects of these ration cuts.
One thing that occurs just when you sort of say, we've been doing this gradually for a while, I think that's one reason why it's hard to raise the alarm here, because it's a slow process rather than falling off a cliff. But when you say people are having to subsist on 60% of a minimum, so less than what is barely enough, what other resources do they have? You mentioned the tensions. Is there any way that they can top up what they get from you?
There is limited, unfortunately, opportunity to do so. The refugees don't have access to the labour market. They're discouraged from moving out into the broader community. So they are wholly dependent on the support they're receiving from WFP and the other international organisations. The effects of these cuts are going to be increasingly dramatic. So as a result, the World Food Programme has gone public with this call for further assistance. We're in contact with our donors, we're liaising with the government, and we're optimistic that through this effort, additional funding will be made available.
It's a pretty shaming position for the international community to see this. The 60% really brings it alive, I think, when you put it like that. Where are you going to get the further assistance from? Do you just go back to the same people again and ask for a little more? Or are there people who, to be frank, deserve, really should be sort of embarrassed, shamed into coming forward? Where aren't you getting money from?
It's not a question of shaming. Unfortunately, as you know, the world is in a difficult situation at the moment. The UN World Food Programme is supporting the 4 famines in Yemen, in Somalia, in South Sudan, and in Nigeria. WFP has large operations in the Middle East. We're also supporting large refugee populations throughout Eastern and Sub-Saharan Africa. So it's not that our traditional donors aren't doing what they can. It's simply that an operation like Tanzania perhaps doesn't grab the headlines in the same way that a number of the others do. And so we are putting that increased emphasis on what the needs are in Tanzania in the hope of attracting further funding.
Michael, good luck. Michael Dunford, the WFP's representative in Tanzania, outlining for us the plight of the people, the more than 300,000 refugees living in the northwest corner of Tanzania over the border from Burundi and DRC.
Sports now with Matthew Kenyon.
Hi folks, the back page of today's Times newspaper here in the UK makes pretty grim reading for Arsenal fans. This is what it says: unacceptable, unwatchable, unforgivable. That's not what Liverpool fans think.
Left-footed from Gomez this time, and Firmino's there! And Liverpool take the lead! Mane now into the area on his right foot, Coles! Scores! Mane didn't need anyone else! Salah's over the halfway line, clear through on goal, Mohamed Salah scores! Salah's cross, and it's headed in by Sturridge! Now it's 4-0.
You heard it unfold here on the BBC World Service. A 4-0 thumping for Arsenal, handed out by Liverpool's Sadio Mane, Mohamed Salah and co, which left even the Gunners manager Arsene Wenger admitting his side's performance had been disastrous.
Overall, I think defensively our performance was from the back to forward was not at the level requested, and they took advantage of it. It raises many questions, but I still believe that you have not to think that these players are not good. They are good players, but it's sure that today we were not at the level.
Elsewhere, a win for Chelsea against Everton, Spurs against Burnley, West Brom against Stoke, both finished 1-1. In Spain, Real Madrid had to come from behind to draw 2-2 at home to Valencia. And in France, Radamel Falcao scored twice as the champions Monaco thrashed Marseille 6-1. Monaco had Kylian Mbappe on the bench. The latest suggestion is he might be going to Paris Saint-Germain on loan, but we'll have to wait and see. Well, even though the top leagues in Europe have barely got going once again this season, it is international football which will take centre stage over the next 10 days with World Cup qualifying for Russia 2018. African qualifying will move through the halfway stage with back-to-back matches which will go a long way to deciding who makes it to the finals. One standout clash, Uganda against Egypt in Kampala this Thursday, followed by a meeting in Alexandria on the 5th of September. The pair, of course, were in the same group at the Nations Cup earlier on this year, with Egypt, the eventual finalists, grabbing a late winner in their group game. But the Cranes' Dennis Onyango, the continent's African-based player of the year, says this one could be different.
It's going to be fireworks for us and them in Kampala because they know what kind of a team we are, our strengths, our weaknesses, and we also know how strong they are going forward because they've got very good attackers, very experienced, very quick, and for us we just need to be very patient at the back and we avoid mistakes.
Much more build-up through the week on Newsday, Sport Today and Focus on Africa here on the BBC. No Alex Iwobi for Nigeria in their games against Cameroon. He's got a thigh injury. Good news for Nigerian sports fans. They've claimed the women's Afrobasket crown after a big win over Senegal in the final on Sunday. They took the continental title with a 65 points to 48 victory in Bamako. Both teams had already qualified for the World Cup next year by virtue of reaching the final. It's Nigeria's third women's title. It means the country now hold both the women's and the men's crown. Their men's team defend their title in just over a week's time. A couple of other lines for you. A fine end to the season for South Africa's world 800-metre champion Caster Semenya. She set a new world best for the rarely run 600 metres at the meeting in Berlin. And it's the start of the US Open tennis later. This time tomorrow, we'll be talking about a proper test for the returning Maria Sharapova. She is unseeded, of course. She's up against second seed Simona Halep in the first round.
Thank you, Matthew.
My pleasure.
Nice to see you again.
Lovely to be back.
10th of the hour.
Now, plastic carrier bags are banned in Kenya from today, following in the footsteps of other African countries like Rwanda, South Africa and Eritrea. Two previous attempts to implement the ban failed after manufacturers successfully challenged the move. The BBC's Anne Soy reports from a cattle farm in Western Kenya.
It's milking time at Nancy Ledama's farm in Kitengela, about half an hour's drive south of Nairobi. Like many members of her Maasai community, she treasures her cows.
It is our tradition and our culture to keep cows, and we feel we cannot do without them.
But like in many growing urban centers in Kenya, there is a huge mound of exposed garbage about 100 meters from Nancy's farm.
The cows are used to coming to the dam site. It is not us who bring them.
Why not take them to grazing fields elsewhere?
They are taken to the grazing field, but because there are some greens in the dam site that they are used to, which are obviously softer and better than the dry grass out there. So we find them coming back. They run back here.
It's not a healthy diet for her livestock. Nancy has lost count of the number of cows she has had to sell prematurely to the slaughterhouse.
As they consume the remnants, they tend to swallow some of the bugs. With the time, those bugs tie around inside the stomach. Finally, you find a cow unable to walk. Sometimes the cow cannot stand, cannot function well, and then we realize it is the bugs. And then we just take the cow to the market. We sell it, then it is slaughtered.
The United Nations Environment Programme says huge amounts of polythene bags are pulled out of livestock in Nairobi's abattoirs, as many as 20 bags per cow, raising fears of plastic contamination in beef. Kenya's Environment Minister, Professor Judy Wahungu, says the ban was long overdue.
In Kenya, in 2010, over 24 million single-use plastic bags were estimated to be used monthly. These plastic bags take between 20 to 1,000 years to biodegrade and thus have a long presence in the environment. Plastic bags now constitute the biggest challenge to solid waste management in Kenya.
The Kenyatta International Convention Centre is buzzing with activity. I can see easily hundreds of customers who've come here to meet with manufacturers who are offering alternatives to plastic bags. And there are plenty of options on offer, from the traditional hand-woven baskets, which are called kiondo, to biodegradable garbage bin liners. In every stand, people are stopping for explanations on how they can use these new and not so new bags. I'll speak with some of them.
I'm looking at what now we should be able to utilize after the banning of the light gauge plastic.
What have you found so far?
Quite encouraging. I was hoping I will also get people who have the equipment to manufacture these products.
And what about the ban? What do you think about it?
It has taken too long to have. It should have come many years ago.
If other countries have done, for example, Rwanda, why not Kenya? It is doable. In the beginning, we never used to have paper bags. So people are going to adapt to what has been done. So it's a very good idea.
Bye to plastics and welcome to clean environment.
Yeah, I can see you've got three beautiful hand-woven bags. They've used leather on the edges, and this is reeds, I think.
Yes. I have 3, one for shopping in the supermarket, one for fruits, and one will be in my husband's car, so that when he goes shopping, he's also sorted.
The plastic bag ban is in many ways taking people back to the old ways. So in a way, one industry has been killed, but another one revived.
The BBC's Anne Soy reporting.
5 minutes to the hour, let's talk about hyperloops. A hyperloop could be the future of high-speed travel if Elon Musk, the serial inventor and billionaire, has his way. It's a great idea, simply. Big vacuum tubes which fire you at super high speeds, 700 miles an hour, so that's faster than flying. So the guy behind Tesla and SpaceX is very, very keen on this. That's the theory. What about the practice? Well, he's organised a competition for teams of students from around the globe who've been competing with the designs for the pods in which you would be fired along these vacuum tubes. Ryan Castle is with one of the teams from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Told me about their idea.
Our system used 2 cold gas thrusters. That's compressed gaseous nitrogen that goes inside of 2 tanks that are about twice the size of scuba tanks. And then we release all of that air very quickly. We get about 2.3 Gs of acceleration for about 3 seconds, and we propel ourselves, down the tube.
Give us an idea what it is about Hyperloop that so excites you. Would you have been working in this area anyway? Would you have been coming up with ideas for shuttle pods like this without Hyperloop, or has the project kind of brought out all your thinking?
Yeah, I really think that this competition has really been kind of a spark. I think all of the underlying ideas and technology was already there, but just having this opportunity to be able to demonstrate the technology that we have and we're able to develop throughout this process, it's really been interesting and a great time and fun.
And from the competition, did you cast envious glances at anyone else's pod? Anything else that made you think, I wish we'd thought of that?
So there's some braking delay mechanisms that we saw that were like, oh, that's a pretty neat idea. So we're hoping to, try to integrate those things in future iterations of the pod.
And give us an idea as well. How does this work? Is this basically Elon Musk asking very clever people to do his work for him and dressing it up as a competition? Because that's what it looks like.
Yeah, it's definitely a recruiting thing for SpaceX. They really like to see kind of the cutting edge of, undergraduates and graduate students at the university and really get the people, their applicant pool all in one place together.
And rather than sort of writing a CV and filling in a form, you have to build a pod.
Right. It's been a great demonstration of, the hard work that would go into, a job like SpaceX or Tesla or some of the other ventures that, Mr. Musk is doing at the moment. So it's really been fun to, kind of be able to demonstrate that.
And was the man himself there, or do you meet him further down the road?
So Elon was there today, spoke a few words. He gave a countdown for one of the teams that was running. So, yeah, he was there, and, he was there the last time we were at the competition as well. So I think he's really enthusiastic about this project, and he was really looking forward to, the future.
Well, we're all looking forward to the future, but how much do we need to travel from LA to San Francisco in 30 minutes when we can just dial up on a Skype? We're talking to you. This is London. This is London to California, and we're talking very well.
Yeah, I think that, if this does become a reality in, 10, 20, 30 years, I think that it could really change the way a lot of people's, lives work. I mean, how much time does everybody waste, driving in traffic? Whereas, you could live in San Diego and work in LA, or, live in Madison where I'm, going to school currently, and work in Chicago. A lot of these different things can just really revolutionize the way that, we live our daily lives. We've been out here just for the past week in LA, and it's been pretty brutal with traffic. So I think in some areas it could definitely be useful, and some probably, too expensive. Roads work pretty well for the most part, too.
Ryan Castle.
Before the news, a quick